Good afternoon, everyone. For my second presentation, I'll be focusing on data management plans as a unifying activity within research data management. I'll talk a little bit about policies and requirements, some guidance and resources and tools which are available to help researchers and research support staff to create data management plans, and I'll provide pointers to a couple of examples. I'll give a sort of general overview and introduction to the process or the activity of data management planning. I'll talk a little bit about the policies which have been put in place before the new European Commission data management pilot took effect. Essentially, the developments in policies in other parts of the world which have informed the EC's thinking in this area. I'll talk about the data management pilot in Horizon 2020, specifically the data management planning aspect of that, and then I'll provide pointers to some support and resources that might be found useful. So, data management plans and planning. Research funders will often ask nowadays for a data management plan to be submitted alongside the grant application, basically as part of the grant application process. Some also require subsequent versions to be developed during the course of the project. The European Commission, in fact, doesn't require a DMP to be submitted at the application stage, but does require several versions to be created during the course of the project. But I'll talk about the detail in there. Interestingly, in the UK certainly, and in the US, higher education institutions are increasingly asking or requiring, in some cases, their researchers to develop data management plans, regardless of whether it's a funder requirement. They see an institutional benefit in the process of data management planning as a communication activity. But we're getting a little bit ahead. What is a data management plan? Well, it's usually a short document which will detail specifics of the data sets that are created during a research project, and that would be accompanied with information on how the data can be accessed and utilised, or if it's sensitive data, either for commercial or ethical sensitivities, then it will record why the information is sensitive and the steps that have to be taken in order to ensure that there's no inadvertent data leaks, essentially. So data management planning is the process of planning, describing and communicating the activities that are carried out during the research life cycle in order to 1. Keep sensitive data safe, 2. Maximise data's reuse potential, and 3. Support longer term preservation. So one of the things I often say when I'm doing advocacy activities, speaking to researchers, is that research data management has two primary purposes. One is to open data to everyone, and the other is to keep it closed off from everyone. It really depends on the nature of the research, of the project, of the data itself. So keeping sensitive data safe is one side of the coin, and ensuring that anyone that would be able to benefit from it where it's safe to do so is able to see it. That's the other side of that coin. So data management planning is an underpinning activity. It pulls together different strands of data management activities, and often increasingly in a more kind of consortial world, it pulls them together across multiple project partners. So one thing you'll hear me say a number of times in the next 20 or so minutes is that data management planning is a process of communication. So what are the benefits of data management planning? Well, it's intuitive, I think, that planned activities will stand a better chance of meeting their goals than unplanned ones. Just as if you were going on an unfamiliar journey, you would you'd have a better chance of getting to where you want to go by using a map. So a research project, especially one with multiple project partners, stands a better chance of reaching a satisfactory conclusion if there's essentially a roadmap to get there. That's not to say that the roadmap is immutable. It will change. It's a living document. It will be brought up to date as the research progresses. So that's another kind of core message of this presentation, is that the plan is not something which is fixed and set in stone. It's a process of communication, description, etc. So the process of planning is a process of communication. I mentioned that that's increasingly important in our interdisciplinary world. Collaboration will always be more harmonious if the project partners, and sometimes those project partners will be in industry where the norms are slightly different from higher education. They may be in other universities, in other countries, again with different norms and expectations. But if all of these partners are on the same page, then harmony should abound. In terms of data security, if there are genuinely good reasons not to publish or share data, be that commercial or ethical sensitivities, the project will be on much more solid ground if these are flagged early in the process. Data management planning also provides an ideal opportunity to engender good practice among the research community with regard to things like file formats, metadata standards, storage, risk management practices, and all of these, when done appropriately and done well, will lead to greater longevity of data and improved quality standards. Some data, of course, is you get a one chance to capture it. It's unique, and if it's lost forever, and that's the sort of data that requires very scrupulous attention. So those were the benefits of data management planning, but what are the limits of it? Well, a plan cannot do the work for you. Many will be familiar with Korzybski's saying the map is not the territory. Probably fewer will be familiar with the Scottish vernacular version of that, which says that chalk's no shears. Designing something is not the same as doing it. The diagram here, marking out a pattern on a cloth, is not the same as making the garment. So it's important to remember that the human challenges in data management can often be more difficult to meet than the technological ones. Again, communication is vital, and the process of planning helps with the process of communication. What does a data management plan look like? As I mentioned before, they're usually quite short documents. In the US, the National Science Foundation has an upper page limit of 2, so it's a 2-page document. In most cases, it will be a short document which will define how data will be either captured or created, how it will be documented and described, who will be able to access it, where it will be stored during the project, how it will be backed up and protected, and then whether and how it will be preserved and shared for the longer term. I mentioned before that DMPs are often submitted as part of funding applications, but my view certainly is that they're useful whenever researchers are creating or reusing data, and it's especially useful when the research involves multiple partners, different cultures and norms, etc. Who's involved in data management planning? Well, research data management broadly is a hybrid activity. It involves multiple stakeholder groups, and therefore the same stakeholder groups are likely to be involved in the production and maintenance of data management plans. The principal investigator will usually have the ultimate responsibility for data. In some UK funders, that responsibility has actually been passed one level up to the institution. So for example, the EPSRC, the Engineering and Physical Sciences Research Council, has an institutional responsibility for research data management rather than the ultimate responsibility lying with the PI. So the PI or the institution will have the ultimate responsibility, but the likelihood is that it will be somebody at an RA level, a research assistant or equivalent, who will be more involved in day-to-day data management. Other interested stakeholders, the institutional funding office might have a compliance role to make sure that what's being done fits in with institutional policy, the laws of the land, etc. Library, IT, legal services, etc. might be involved. The library might liaise with persistent identifier minting bodies like DataCite. They may liaise with an external service to do that. IT will often be providing the storage and the networking infrastructure. Legal may have a view on things like Freedom of Information, Data Protection Act type legislation. And then you think beyond the walls of your own institution, partners, project partners in other institutions in other countries, commercial partners and so on, will all have a part to play in this process. So the next section is about policies. I'm going to talk briefly about some policies which have led to the or which have foreshadowed the European Commission's open data pilot, and then I'll talk about some specifics of the open data pilot itself. In the UK, the public research funders are gathered together under the umbrella of RC UK Research Councils UK. There are 7 of them. They're organised on a domain basis. So there's one for the arts and humanities, one for biological and biosciences, one for engineering and physical sciences, etc. It's quite rare for the RC UK councils to speak with a single voice, but a few years ago they released their common principles on data policy, which underpin all of their individual data management policies. And essentially what they say is that publicly funded data is a public good. It's something which belongs to the public and the public should be able to access and reuse. That it's necessary to preserve data for the longer term in order to ensure that it's not lost. That data should be discoverable, i.e. that appropriate metadata should be attached to it to enable people to find and establish whether the data set that they found is useful to them. Then there are a couple of principles about rights. There's the right of confidentiality for the subjects of data. There's the right of first use for the researcher or the research team who developed the data set. So essentially that's an embargo, the first crack at the whip. There's the right to be recognised after the embargo period has lapsed. Other people may cite a data set and the originator should receive due recognition. And finally, that public funding for publicly funded data is entirely appropriate. So in the UK, 6 of the 7 RC UK councils require a data management plan at the application stage. Some other funders like Wellcome Trust and Cancer Research also require that. The 7th RC UK Council, EPSRC, I mentioned before, has an institutional level policy, but they don't require data management plans to be submitted to them, but they do expect them to be created and maintained. In the US, the National Science Foundation announced its own data management planning requirement in 2010, which took effect in 2011. In 2013, the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy introduced the DMP requirement, which all of the agencies that it funds now have their own policies in this area or are developing them. And the White House requirements include mechanisms to cover compliance with plans and policies. So they actually check the plans which are created and check compliance, which is something that we don't think that the RC UK councils currently do to any great extent. In Australia, they have recently released policies around communication of results, i.e. open access to research publications, and also management of data. They require outline plans for data management to be produced, and that should cover things like storage access and reuse arrangements. So oftentimes data management policies are much of a muchness, but they often have different emphases, and in some cases they're expressed in different language, and that will depend upon the national or the disciplinary context in which they're operating. So in Europe, Horizon 2020, as I mentioned this morning, includes a data management planning pilot. It covers innovation actions and research and innovation actions. There's a longer and more detailed list available via the link that's at the top of the page. What they ask for in their data management plans is information about what types of data will be created, what standards will be used, how will the data be shared or made available, or if it's not appropriate, how will it be kept safe, and what curation and preservation activities will be carried out in order to ensure the longevity of the data. They take a 3-phase approach to data management planning, which is one more than the highest previous, which was in the UK NERC, the Natural Environment Research Council, require 2 iterations of data management plans. So the EEC is raising the bar here. They don't require a DMP to be submitted with the grant application, but for successful projects they require an initial DMP to be developed and submitted within the first 6 months, a mid-term DMP which is more detailed, and a final review stage DMP which has more detail yet. I should mention that not all of the, obviously because this only covers innovation actions and research and innovation actions, that only about 20% of Horizon 2020 is covered by this pilot. So if you're unsure whether you're covered by it, you should check with the Commission or with somebody in your institution. There are opt-out conditions if there are security issues or if there are clashes with the requirement to protect intellectual capital, that kind of thing. There are various opt-out conditions that you can find via the participants portal. So I mentioned that there are 3 versions or 3 iterations of data management plan which are required. Within 6 months, the Commission asks that for each data set, the project specify what the reference and name is. I give a description of the data set, outline what standards and metadata will be used, make a statement on data sharing, whether it's appropriate to share the data, and if so, how it will be shared and when. And there's a question about archiving and preservation to start thinking about how it will be stored, deposited for the longer term. And that also covers in-project storage and backup. The second and third iterations cover the same ground, but it's expected that there will be more detail in the final version. And what they say is that this is a kind of principle-driven policy. They say scientific research data should be easily discoverable, accessible, accessible and intelligible, usable beyond the original purpose for which it was collected, and interoperable to specific quality standards. So what the DCC has done is put this into a data management planning template within its DMPonline tool, and we've derived questions which are derived from the verbatim Horizon 2020 policy, asking for discoverability. Are the data and associated software discoverable, readily locatable, I guess, identifiable by means of a standard identification mechanism, i.e. a DOI. So that's good practice to have an unchanging identifier, so that if things move around, that the original resource can still be linked to the publications that it underpins. There's a few pieces of support and resources which are available. The EC themselves have funded a number of things to at an infrastructure level to help researchers to manage their data effectively. The DCC, which is the centre that I work for, has developed a number of resources in this area. I wrote a book chapter a few years ago on data management plans and planning, which was published in Graham Pryor's Managing Research Data book. We develop lots of guidance, and one of our how-to guides is called How to Develop a Data Management and Sharing Plan. We've developed several iterations of our checklist for a data management plan, all of which are available via the web link there. Everything that we produce is available on a Creative Commons basis, so it can be taken and tweaked and repurposed without the need for any permission. The only stipulation is that the sort of due credit is given. And we've also developed several iterations of the DMPonline tool, which I mentioned earlier. And what I'll do now is give a quick walkthrough of this tool. It's a free and open source tool, so you can register an account and have a play around with it at your leisure. What it is, it's an online wizard type tool which helps researchers and indeed research support people to create and maintain data management plans. It provides verbatim funder questions and guidance, so if your funder requires a data management plan, then we'll have taken their policy and entered it into the tool, so that whatever you type in to DMPonline will hopefully meet the funder's requirements. It also has a facility to provide guidance from universities. If you were applying to a funder that didn't have a data management planning policy, but your university did, then that university could have a template or guidance in the DMPonline system. It's free to use. It's been around for 5 years now, and the code is also open source. It's available via GitHub. So the way in which it works is that you have to register in order to save your plans and return to them, and the only thing that you need is an email address. So you sign up for the tool, and you can go ahead and create a plan there, picking whichever research funder you wanted to apply to. The version, or sorry, the funder in this image is the European Commission, Horizon 2020. And as I mentioned, you can also select your institution, and if they have a template in the system, it will provide that when you go on to create your plans. The first screen that you see is a summary, so you can tell at a glance what is going to be required of you as you produce your data management plan, and then the questions which are asked by your funders are answered in the system via a WYSIWYG data entry, just free text field here that can be formatted and things like that. And on the right hand side of the screen you can see that there are sort of pointers, hints and tips and guidance to help you to meet you know, good practice and the expectations of the funders. Plans, as I've said many times over the last 20 minutes or so, data management planning is a collaborative, communicative process, so plans can obviously be shared, they can be jointly edited, jointly authored by different researchers or different research support people in different institutions, and the tool will store who edited any given section last, so that you can, you know, have conversations about the correct way to answer the various questions. Obviously, if somebody's working on a section, it locks it so that they can save it and you don't lose any changes. Once you've completed your data management plan, it can be exported. In fact, it could obviously be exported when it's incomplete, and you can export as plain text if you want to put it into a word processor and format it yourself, as docx if you want a sort of pre-formatted version, PDF if you just simply want to attach something that can't be changed, HTML, XML, all those kinds of things. And institutions can customize the tool by adding their own templates, adding the custom guidance to help their researchers to meet funder requirements. They can provide boilerplate text for answers where that's appropriate. I always kind of frown on that because I say that the process of planning is more important than the plans that are created, but there are certain aspects of data management planning, like backup arrangements, for example, where there's no point in reinventing the wheel. There will be one backup strategy and all you need to do is point towards it. Non-English language versions can be created. There's a Spanish version has been launched quite recently, and I've been in communication with Welsh universities who are interested in producing a Welsh language version of the tool. So there's more information about DMPonline, including a screencast, which is very similar to the walkthrough that I've just done. There are some very useful non-DCC tools and resources I could point towards. Andrew Salins and Sherry Lake from the University of Virginia wrote a book chapter on data management, assessment and planning tools in Joyce Ray's book of last year. There's the DMP tool, which is the US version of DMPonline. There's lots of useful guidance via the UK Data Archive, in the UK NERC, European Union, and other universities have produced lots of really useful resources, and I would point towards Oxford as a good example of that. Example plans. There are lots of data management plans which are available via the web, and the ones that we've found and thought were useful we've gathered together and linked to via a page on our website, and the link is given there, so you should feel free to have a look at the plans which are gathered together there. It's important to remember that there's no magic bullet for data management planning and no one-size-fits-all solution. It worries me when people ask to see examples of successful data management plans, ostensibly to benchmark, but I worry that copying and pasting is what they mean by benchmarking there. Much of the benefit of data management planning is in the process of planning. It's more important than the plans which are produced at the end of the process. And as I said before, and repeat ad nauseam, DMP is a communication activity between data collectors and their contemporaries, be that the project partners or people who are working in the same area or even in a different area at the same time, and future data reusers. Lots of data sets like social sciences, climate change data, etc., will be of interest long after the collectors of the data have moved on. So it's a communication activity between contemporaries and with the future. So thank you very much. These slides will be made available after the event via the organisers. I'm sorry that I'm not present to deliver this presentation in person, but if you have any questions, please feel free to email me at martin.donnelly@ed.ac.uk. Thank you.